Hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly recap. We have special guests joining us today. We have Nick Nelson, Creative Director at Consensys, which is one of the largest blockchain software firms. And you're probably familiar with them because they make a lot of stuff that we use on a daily basis, probably even without realizing it. MetaMask, for one, Infura, which is the largest RPC node provider as well. So they're joining us because they have commissioned a survey with YouGov, in which they reached out to 15,000 people in 15 countries to basically figure out what people think of Web3. I mean, for us as crypto natives, we are immersed in the space on a daily basis. So obviously we love Web3, but what does the rest of the world think? I think that's an important insight that we need to have if we're predicting mass adoption to come and the next billion users and stuff like that. We need to know what these people think, right, of what we're doing and what's being built in the space. So thank you so much, Nick, for joining us. And
yeah, no problem.
We also have Jeremy Nation, a staff reporter at the Defiant, and I'm YYC Trader, head of news. So I think let's get started, Nick. If you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself, your crypto journey, and about Consensys.
Sure, no problem. Well, let me just plug in my headphones. Much better. So how did things start? Well, I joined the ecosystem about 5.5 years ago when I joined Consensys. Prior to that, I'd done work across marketing. My background's actually in math and computer science, so I have a development backend as well. And I got into marketing and creative through a series of jobs that I had. I started my own small firm and eventually joined Consensys, where I really took an interest in this cross-section of what crypto is and what it represents, what we probably today would call Web3, less about the cryptocurrencies and more about the technology behind it, really bringing together a variety of my interests, which include the technology, social aspects, and of course, the promise of world-changing tech. So I think all those things together made it really appealing to me. Now I'm creative director at Consensys. I've been working very closely with the company as I work there, but with teams within the company to really help to shape our new brand and share that out with the world. And a big part of this launch that we've done for our brand is the Web3 survey, which you see here, and which is what we're talking about a lot today. And really the idea behind the survey was to take a lot of the things that we thought about Web3 and we thought about the industry and really put them to test. So there's been a lot of reports that have gone out, a lot of surveys that have been done where we talk about stuff that might be considered more money crypto, things like cryptocurrencies, volatility, and how that impacts people. What we wanted to focus on was more the motivations behind why people might want to adopt Web3. Things like, do you think you're contributing value to the internet? Do you think you're having a meaningful impact? Do you think you're compensated for what you're adding to the internet? And these are all things that we think are more congruent with what we believe to be the future of Web3. It's really about empowerment. And what we see ourselves doing here in the space as Consensys is really inspiring and empowering people to build and be the builders of the next stage of the internet.
That's I think that's something that we all need to know, as being in the space actively. And we all at the Defiant, we obviously are DeFi maxis, right? So we believe that decentralized finance obviously is the future of finance, or we hope, if regulators, banks, and other interests let it flourish the way we hope it does, right? So I think let's dive straight in. If you'd like to share your screen, and we could dive straight into the survey results.
Sure, happy to jump in, but wanted to make one note on, you mentioned DeFi as being so critical, and I think it really comes down to value, right? People are doing things on a daily basis to create value, and DeFi is a way of really, as an individual, harnessing the levers of raw value as mediated by this new kind of technology. You don't have to use an intermediary, and that's what makes it so interesting and what's so powerful about it. But what we see is that, and the results I think are suggestive of this, is that people are harnessing value in all kinds of different ways, whether you're an artist, whether you're doing DeFi, whether you're building anything, any kind of content that you're sharing online, people are doing things that create value and they're sharing that value online. And so where DeFi is really a way of accessing the levers of value, particularly in a financial context, we see it as really applying broadly to value across the spectrum. So with that, I'm happy to share screen. Just give me a moment. All right. Is it possible for you to share this link with the people who are watching, just so that they can have a look and follow along if they'd like? This is
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you so much. This is all up and live right now, so feel free to peruse. There's a print version you can download, and there are country-specific reports that you can also check out. So if you want to look at any of the details on any of the 15 markets that we sent this out to, those details are all there. So please do check that out. All right. So scrolling through here, you're free to read this on your own afterwards. I don't want to just go through the content linearly like this, but really try and provide a little bit of context around why we've done this and what the results are. So the first main thing is that we see this as the first report of its kind, really digging into these sorts of questions. So what we found out at a top level, and what we believe, is that people really are embracing the values up behind Web3. And by the values of Web3, I'm speaking primarily about things like data privacy, data ownership, sharing the value that's created, sharing profits that companies are making from your data, desire to control identity. These are all big questions that were kind of open, and we assumed people were interested in them, but we didn't really have confirmation. Well, now we've got actually pretty stark confirmation that these things are interesting to people, but they may not know that it's connected to Web3. And so that kind of offers a bit of the opportunity that we're seeing in the space, which is there are big gaps in knowledge. And some of it is that when people hear crypto, they think this is cryptocurrencies, this is money crypto. What we're trying to do is pivot it to tell people that there's more to the space than the money crypto side. There's also the tech crypto side. So this data here is quite interesting. You can see 83% of respondents globally think that data privacy is important. That number really was quite surprising to us because we understand data privacy is an important quality. It's an important thing to have, and you want that sense of control. But we didn't know that we would end up with a number that was this high, and that's across the globe. You can see you can filter by age here, and you can see that as you go up in age, data privacy becomes much more important. You can see here in the 90%. As you go down, younger people tend not to care as much about data privacy. However, you still see numbers that are quite high. So
I think, I mean, the younger generation, I mean, us included, I think we're used to signing away our lives when we sign up for services, right? But I remember like when online banking first came out, like my dad and his cohort, they were completely against it. They said, no, how can we give banking info online? Buying stuff with credit cards? No way. It was like a big taboo, for a long time. Of course, now everyone's using it, but it totally makes sense.
The derogatory term plastic, was pervaded when they first came out. I'm like, oh, you take plastic?
Yeah, I remember. And it was, for the longest time, it was like people thought, you use credit cards if you couldn't afford to buy something in cash, so there was also that attached to it. So it was so weird. But of course, now cash has almost disappeared, I think, from our daily lives. I can't remember the last time I bought something in cash. So,
you know what's interesting about that is Bitcoin's white paper, the title of it or the subhead is a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. So I think that's really, it's interesting to put it into perspective that when we talk about decentralization, which is kind of a question in the survey, which is like, do people care about decentralization? It's interesting because cash is like the original decentralized currency, right? You can hold it. No one is governing your spending of it. It's somewhat anonymous if you're not tracking the ID numbers on the cash. And when Bitcoin came out, it was specifically a cash replacement. It was a way for you to, in an intermediary free way, trade cash between people. And so it's interesting to suggest or to say, we don't use cash anymore. And yet at the same time, some of what this technology does is give some of the same qualities that cash had to things that are electronic. So where we talk about plastic or banking, online banking, a lot of those are mediated by centralized institutions, whereas something like a cryptocurrency is mediated only by the network. So it's not really the same format of permissions. So I think it's interesting to consider the cash equivalent of an electronic currency.
Is sentiment around crypto like improving or worsening versus the previous survey that you guys conducted?
I would say that's kind of I wouldn't say it's a complicated question, but there's multiple ways that you could look at it. One is that there was a lot of challenges in the centralized finance space, a lot of very well-known crashes, FTX among them, that really had an impact on sentiment. We have a segment on that down here, I believe. What we hit on the news cycle. So respondents in Germany, Vietnam, India, and South Africa are more likely to declare that the bankruptcies of centralized cryptocurrency companies had no impact on their trust in the ecosystem. However, you can see the sum of the dark green and the white show people who believe there was an impact. So heavy impact in the dark green and white as moderate impact. So you can see across the board, people view these crashes as really detrimental to the perceptions of the ecosystem and detrimental to our cause, which is to help to spread the understanding of the system as being something that is a net positive for people, right? By empowering them. So what we believe it indicates, and this also comes through in the survey data, is that when people hear crypto, they don't differentiate kind of real crypto or real decentralized Web3 with centralized Web3. People don't really understand the difference between self-custody and a custodial wallet. So if you have a wallet on a centralized provider, people aren't seeing what the difference between that and say MetaMask is, which is of course a truly decentralized wallet that permits the real power of Web3, which is self-custody.
Absolutely. And I think these findings make sense because most of the companies that went bankrupt didn't operate or didn't have many users from these countries, right? Like FTX was mainly US based users, right?
Yeah.
For the most part. Even BlockFi and all the other ones that, even Celsius was Europe, I guess, a lot of Europe, but not so much Asia. So I'd imagine Vietnam, India, South Africa would all be using Binance, right? In the majority of cases. So yeah, and totally agree with you. When I speak to most of my real life friend circle, for them, crypto means trading coins on Binance or a comparable exchange. Like no one gets into the nuance of self-custody, or they haven't bothered yet, right? Even though we've seen so many failures of centralized institutions in the space. I think it's the convenience and maybe to some extent the fear factor, because a lot of people, like I have heard this from a lot of friends who say, you know what, I'm scared of losing my keys. Like there's no, like the whole thing of no recourse, code is law. It's great in theory, but when it comes to actually entrusting your money to such a platform, I mean, a substantial chunk of your net worth, you think twice, right? Unless like you'd want some sort of customer service, less for lack of a better word.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that really speaks to the core user interface problem of the Web3 space, which is one of the big obstacles beyond education is how do we make it so that people can feel safe? Do people really want control over their own keys? Do they want to take that responsibility, or do they like handing that off to someone else? And I think it's on our industry to provide alternatives to pure self-custody if people don't want to take that responsibility onto themselves. And people are coming up with their own solutions, and the industry is evolving to meet that user need. What I think is interesting about that is the user interface challenge is really how we will get to that next billion people. How do we make systems that are easy to use, easy to get into, easy to onboard into, and that you feel safe using? And part of the objective with MetaMask is not only to be the best Web3 wallet and the best user experience. But we also have MetaMask Portfolio now, which is really helping to build out that more sophisticated user experience that people will be looking for.
And it is kind of a polarizing topic in terms of like custody and account recovery. We saw Ledger tried to roll out account recovery procedures, and the entire crypto community was in an uproar about it. But when you come down to it, there's billions of people out there that need account recovery options in order to be able to access these types of digital assets with any sense of security. So we need to be able to meet in the middle and build some sort of infrastructure where custody is an option, but you also have the ability to self-custody. And I think that at some point we'll reach a level of sophistication in the user base where people are going to be able to grow into that self-custody, but they need to have those steps in order to come in and take ownership of these digital assets in a way that they're not afraid to lose them forever.
Yeah, absolutely. Continuing on through the report, some more interesting data that is supporting some of these ideas on Web3 is we asked people how aware are they of the concept of Web3. So this comes after a series of other awareness questions about NFTs and about metaverse. But what was interesting was that globally, there's an extremely high awareness of crypto. The number is, I believe, in around the 90% mark. But the number of people who say they're actually very familiar with Web3 is only around 8%. So that is about as stark a gap as you can get in a survey with this amount of population. You have a huge number of people who are aware of crypto and very small number that say that they're very familiar with Web3. We believe that is core to what our role is as Consensys, is really helping to bridge that gap. So we, for example, have MetaMask Learn, which is a new learning platform. And the objective there was really to get people onto the platform in a simple, fun, easy to use way with interactive simulations that help expose them to Web3 in a safe and friendly way. It's really core to who we think of ourselves as Consensys, which is really participating with the ecosystem to create these experiences and help to mainstream the ideas that surround Web3.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, personally, I don't think like Web3 as a name or a term is catchy enough. I think we can do better as a as a community.
Let's name it. Let's name it now. How about? You have any ideas?
Honestly, I haven't given it much thought, but it has to be something relatable for the masses, right? Everyone knows the internet, right? But if you ask them what's Web 2 or what's Web 3, like no one knows Web 3. They don't even know what Web 2 actually refers to, right? So I don't know. It could be something as simple as Internet 2.0. I don't know, but that's
not bad.
Yeah, it's like right in people's faces, but might be too simple. I don't know, but yeah, that's
internext. How about that? Can we internext?
Yeah, that's not bad.
It's a good one.
I've heard people refer to blockchain networks as the settlement layer of value on the internet. So perhaps if there is something to be extrapolated from that terminology, it might lend itself to this new naming convention.
Yeah, I mean, Polygon's kind of going with the value layer of the internet, right, with their 2.0 roadmap. So, yeah, I mean, if the focus is on value and, retaining control of the value you create, perhaps there's something there. I don't know, like these results clearly show us that people, like Web3 isn't catchy enough, I think. That could be one of the differences. And of course, crypto has the speculation aspect, right? Your coins go up. No wonder 90% of the world knows.
Well, I think there's also a real challenge in differentiating Web3 from crypto speculation, what we call money crypto versus tech crypto, as we've talked about a couple of times. But that differentiation is really, it's a real challenge because most of the popular press covers crypto in this way. It's almost like covering all the car crashes. It's like scams, it's people losing things, but it's not sharing all the good stories because that's not clickbaity. It's not sensational. It doesn't get people excited. So I think there's a real challenge to share those positive stories, and I don't know how you do that given how sensational news has to be, but it is a kind of an open challenge. And I agree, maybe Web3 is not the name of the thing that will help carry it forward. However, it is a nice way to differentiate crypto from some of that more speculative, those speculative ideas.
Yep, makes sense. I think you're probably aware of the Pudgy Penguins, right? And the approach they've taken with the toys. So they launched like these real life toys, and when you buy them, you get these. I think they're QR codes which you can scan and then claim tradable trait NFTs on Polygon. So I think that's an interesting way to kind of attract the masses into Web3, because when you have a 5, 6, 8 year old who says, "Oh, I made $200 off selling my traits," that I think that has a tendency kind of snowball within that demographic. I don't know. These are, and I think Jeremy, we were discussing this last week, was it, about the intersection of digital and physical, and you were saying, that's probably the next trend
Oh yeah,
that we're going to see.
Yeah, I said it before. Phygital is, I think, a word that we're going to begin to see cropping up in our colloquialisms here, and it doesn't surprise me, because I think that the frontier for these companies that have, especially NFT companies that have established themselves, is to create something that is a product that they can sell to people. And naturally speaking, if you have a little figurine that matches the art on your NFT figure, I think children are the natural place to sell that. So Pudgy Penguins has really taken a step forward into the mass market, and the user journey that they're building alongside their product is one that inducts newcomers into the ecosystem, and they're inducting the new generation into the ecosystem. So they're taking the most malleable minds that are formative and ready to learn tech, and they're showing them, hey, this is what the new structure is going to be built on, and these are probably going to be our most sophisticated users in the future.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how this idea of sharing value is evolving, right? It started with currency, with the electronic cash system, but it's moved to be so much more. You're able to create value in so many ways as a person, and not to get too deep into kind of the philosophy of it, but that is kind of the heart of where we see the value of this technology. My camera should be coming back in a second. But where we see the value in this technology is in the way that it enables people to participate in these networks of value. And that goes across the board, because really, what are we doing every day, all day? We're not here because we're obsessed with a network. We're here because of what the power it brings to you is. And where we see the value of this technology is in how it lets people to express themselves, to channel the value that they're creating in new ways. And people are creating value in their lives in many, many different ways. They're waking up, they're working, they're going to school, they're creating financial portfolios. They're doing a lot of things that to them create value and make their lives better. And in many ways, that's the origin of community and culture, is people doing things together to make things better. And we see this technology really as uniquely empowering individuals, communities to really create culture that is more commensurate with really what humanity is all about.
Are people happy with the state of the internet now, or do you think they're seeking change?
I think it's kind of like a yes and no, because the internet is a real all-inclusive idea. It includes Web3, right? Like the base foundation of the internet. The internet itself is decentralized. Packets come and go based on the routers that are there, and if you take one out, they'll find a way. So the internet is kind of like the OG decentralized technology. So when we're talking about the internet, I think the definition is the sort of Web 2.0 services of today that include companies that use surveillance capitalism to really extract value from their users, and they may offer them a platform, but really they position the people who come to their platforms as users. And I think what our results are showing is that there is a real shift from this idea of users just being, people wanting to be used, I guess, on these platforms, people seeing that they're creating value, that their content and their contact networks are the things that are actually making these platforms happen. And it's kind of a slow shift in perspective in how people are seeing their contributions to the online world. And I think that's the thing that we're really excited about with this survey, which is how people are changing their perceptions in their roles online. And I think that is really is going to lead to real adoption if we can set those value levers right, so that people can see, oh, if I do this via Web3, I'm able to participate in new ways in this ecosystem, versus if I do it on a private platform where really they just seek to feed me advertising and get me riled up with algorithm-driven perspectives that are going to keep me clicking, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think gaming is also going to be a big sector going forward, right? We have a story that we're going to talk about, later on in the recap. But you guys must have seen, the whole drama over was it Steam that banned a few accounts that with over $2 million in skins? It just happened this week, I think. So, and a lot of the responses on Twitter was like, Web3 fixes this, and if they were NFTs, then this couldn't happen and stuff like that. So, with more in-game economies kind of sprouting up in various games and beginning to be worth real money, I think there's a great bridge for NFTs, blockchain tech to kind of play a role, and which is why Steam went straight ahead and banned blockchain tech from the store, right, back in 2021.
Yeah.
And Minecraft followed up and completely destroyed NFT worlds, if you remember, which were at I think 20 ETH or something back in the bull. But Epic Games seems to be taking a different route, right? They just kind of the baby steps, obviously, because of we've seen the backlash from gamers when it comes to NFTs, especially back when they were going crazy. But yeah, I think gaming is a great kind of bridge sector that could introduce the masses to Web3. What do you think?
I 100% agree. To me, the metaverse is probably going to emerge from gaming. It's not going to be direct metaverses that are sold as metaverses. It's going to kind of emerge as some kind of network of games that people are already in. When you talk metaverse, it kind of already exists. People are in their phones. It just doesn't feel like the metaverse as we've been sold. But where it comes to gaming, I think so many people are already doing things in games. You mentioned Minecraft. The amount of time people spend building things on these platforms is incredible. And the kind of camaraderie that develops from team games and the evolution of esports, and the idea that I could perhaps collect something from an esports game in the same way that people would save and collect a Babe Ruth home run ball from when the 20s. It was a while ago. But the idea is that there's a lot you can do with NFTs and gaming and to create this immersive, rich world that I think we're just starting to understand how that could work. And also, MetaMask has just released recently a Unity SDK, so people can really start implementing MetaMask much more easily in games. And so we encourage anyone who is a game dev to check out the MetaMask Unity SDK.
I was about to say at 3XP, I was talking to people at MetaMask that mentioned that Unity SDK was going to be going live very soon. So I'm happy to see that people are using it.
Yeah, it's up on the asset store. So if you're interested, check it out.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go through some of the questions that we got from the community, if we can.
Sure.
I think we covered quite a few of them over the course of the survey results. What's most surprising about the findings in the survey? I think that the fact that the majority of people want data privacy but aren't doing anything about it, that's a huge opportunity for Web3. That's a great insight that the report shows.
Yeah, and I can jump in with some specific stats on that, which are pretty surprising. 83% of respondents find data privacy important, and that's globally. And 70% believe they should have a share in the profit made from their data. So 70% of people believe that now, that that message has gotten out there. Really shockingly, 79% of people desire more control over their identity on the internet. So there's a huge desire for people to have like more control, and these are the things that Web3 offers. And so that's why we think this is really promising. Some more stats. I don't want to go through a big list of numbers, but I find them very interesting. 67% believe they should own the things they make on the internet. 69% say internet technology is important to them. 50%, which could be seen as low or high, believe they add value to the internet. And there are some interesting cultural disparities there, where only 5% of people in Japan believe that they added value to the internet, but something around 70% in Nigeria believe they added value to the internet. So really interesting to try and tease apart why people have these different perspectives. But regardless of all those people, only 38% believe that they are adequately compensated for the value that they bring to the internet. So only about 4 out of 10 people believe that they're compensated for what they're bringing. And so that is also very promising, because it shows that people are not satisfied with the current state of things, and they may just not know that Web3 is either a solution or is working towards one.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
I think we've also seen, in terms of reward structures on the internet, look at Brave browser. It's one of the first decentralized browsers to crop up. And the basis of it was like, hey, you have an attention economy. And if you're paying attention to advertising, you should be rewarded for that. So the basic attention token, BAT, was built around rewarding individuals for participating on the internet and participating in that layer of value that they add there with their data and their attention. So it's interesting to see that this concept is starting to evolve in terms of sort of like on a community scale globally.
And I think what's really interesting about that is this idea of participation. We really see participation is the thing, right? It's the way we look at it is look at community. You don't consider yourself a user of community. You don't go outside your home and think like, I'm a user of community today. And you don't think that way about culture. You don't think of yourself as a user of culture when you participate in a cultural event. Those are things that you just feel like exist and you're a part of them. So we say, there are no users of community, there's no users of culture, and there's no users of Web3. In Web3, everyone is a participant, everyone has the opportunity to build, and everyone's empowered to do that.
Did you see a lot more variance in attitudes about Web3 in terms of, like, you saw that disparity between Nigeria and Japan? Were there other places where you saw disparities?
Overall, there was much more skepticism towards crypto in Europe, North America, and South Korea and Japan. And then there was relatively less skepticism and more optimism in areas like Indonesia, South America, Nigeria, the Philippines, and so on. So there seemed to be a little bit of a divide, and those two groups were kind of separated throughout the data. Now, it doesn't mean everyone in North America was totally skeptical. It just meant, like, if you look at the balance of the data, there was overall more skepticism in Europe and UK and North America, and less in, say, in the other cluster mentioned, like Nigeria, Philippines, Indonesia, and so on.
I think that makes sense because most of these places have very volatile currencies.
Yeah.
Right. So for them, just the ability to park their savings in just stable coins, for example, in USD, that's a huge use case that, that's taken hold in South America, Africa, like most emerging countries that look at using crypto, right? Which is why Tron is still, what is it, the second largest blockchain now? And all it does is basically sling USDT around, right? That's
we saw this as a big use case in Argentina. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off there.
Oh, no, go ahead.
We saw this as a big use case in Argentina for sure. That showed up in the data, and I think that's a great observation, that how people relate to their local currency and their local institutions does seem to have an impact on how they perceive crypto and Web3.
Yeah, I mean, you have to imagine if you have a banking system that might not be as easy to access, but then you have a decentralized finance system where anyone can access it if they can get the technology pieces in place. And now you have access to this stable coin, which, perhaps your local currency does not exhibit that stability. I would see that as perhaps a viable option for commerce in the future from their perspective. Also, you have to think these countries may not have felt the effects, as we mentioned earlier in our conversation, of some of the major catastrophic incidences in the space, such as FTX's collapse or Terra Luna's stablecoin collapse. These are things that in some of those regions that you mentioned that have kind of more skepticism towards crypto, a lot of losses took place in those theaters. So
yeah, and I'm sure there's a correlation between the activity of the media as well. How does media cover crypto-related themes in North America or Europe versus in the Philippines or in Argentina? It could just be not only based on sort of a view of the facts as they are. It could be very much more about the way the media operates and how they choose to cover the same events.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, in North America, I think we only see crypto coverage when it's like speculative excess or a rug or a scam or like something collapsed. So there's no kind of in between, like be unbiased, oh, this is what crypto is doing. Like, I don't think I've seen any kind of coverage of that sort from mainstream media, at least. We try to, of course. But yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like hearing about a car crash and deciding roads are no good. It's like we can probably build a safer car. It's not a perfect analogy because we're talking about largely centralized institutions versus the decentralized versions of them. But the idea is there's like a fundamental infrastructure. And just because something like, let's say Yahoo went out of business, it doesn't mean the internet is a bad thing, or it doesn't mean you should be skeptical of the internet. There's a layer of separation between entities that are organizing and conducting business on the network and the network itself and the value that it could provide.
I find it kind of ironic that Zug, Switzerland is kind of considered a crypto hub, but under the same auspices of what you've spoken of before, you don't ban like roads because of a car crash. I think there was a really bad crash in France some year, and then that resulted in the ban of motor racing in Switzerland. So that's kind of an antithetical approach to like governance in terms of like their lawmaking procedures versus their approach to digital assets, which has been ironically allowing flourishing development and innovation. Just a caveat.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Agree.
All right, moving on to some of the other questions that we got. What can people in the industry do to help improve the perception about crypto?
Well, it's a bit of an open question. I think we're trying to figure that out. What can we do? What's effective? What will share our story better? How do we challenge these default assumptions on crypto? One way is to really draw a distinction between money crypto and tech crypto, and really help people see that if they see a story that's about the collapse of a centralized exchange, that doesn't represent the network. That doesn't represent the technology. That represents that company. That represents a set of individuals who are making decisions and it didn't work out, or there was more to the story. I think education is super important. Again, MetaMask Learn is something that we've created for this purpose to help people onboard more easily to the internet, to Web3 rather. And then there's also solving the UI problem. How do we create better onboarding experiences for users? How do we create better experiences for people who want to come in and use DeFi primitives like you might find around Web3? How do we get people onboarding safely? How do we tell people that things are safe and they can trust them? I think these are some things that we're trying to bridge with MetaMask Portfolio, really trying to create that curated experience for people to come in and be able to use what Web3 has to offer in a way that's safer for them. Beyond that, I think it's really up to us as an industry to come together and present like a unified front to help fight the misconceptions on the industry and really differentiate between the casino of money crypto and the tech of tech crypto.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Finally, I actually have a question that's unrelated to the survey, but since we have you, you guys are running the testnet for your layer 2, right? Linea, is that how you pronounce it?
Ooh, open question. I'm not going to prescribe it. Is that how you pronounce it? All right. I like that. No, that is how we tend to pronounce it, but I think globally it's pronounced in many different ways, but this isn't the heart of your question. So
yes. So do you have any alpha for the Defiant community as to participating? I know there have been these NFTs that have been minted weekly and stuff, and the last one is running right now. how can the community, get engaged with the project? What, any alpha you can share would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, all I can really say about that is we're really excited about Linea. We really think this is going to be a big network, and there's going to be a lot of activity on it. There already is. The numbers are pretty incredible. We've had some days passing. I don't actually know the numbers, so I probably shouldn't say them, but huge numbers, like competitive with other large networks in terms of numbers of transactions. A great many number of participating wallets and individuals through these voyages. The Linea voyages, I think, are still running. Today might be the last day on the latest one, so we invite people to participate in that. In terms of additional alpha, I think really just stay tuned to our social channels, check out linea.build, and visit the Linea Twitter site, and we will share exciting updates very shortly.
Awesome. Looking forward to those. Thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and I think we all learned a lot from the survey. And
great. Well, thank you so much for having us on.
Great. Thanks so much.
Really captivating.
All right. Yeah. So that was fun. Let's jump into some of the big news of the week.
Boy, there has been some, hasn't there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In terms of markets, of course, pretty much flat this week after last week's rally. I mean, that's something you'd expect to see, right? Like to kind of the market needs to digest the gains in a way. So it's promising actually for bulls that we're consolidating near the highs, which is promising for further upside, in my opinion. Let me just get my screen on just a second.
Yeah, bulls like pancakes. So that's good.
So we had a report this week that came out from DAP Radar, which was quite surprising to me personally, because all the GameFi stuff that I've been following has been, and metaverse NFTs that I have are all dead, right? Like Jeremy, we're probably holding a lot of the same NFTs. But it was surprising to see that the sector pulled in over $700 million this year, despite,
So that's not probably going to these NFT projects, though. It's more project development, I think. And
it's metaverse projects. Now,
yes.
They didn't exactly break them down, but they did speak about, virtual land volumes completely dropping off a cliff, mainly due to other side, right? Because we had the hype at the beginning of the year, and then kind of volumes completely died off.
Other side had a lot of challenges. I mean, from inception too. I mean, the launch was not exactly clean. And then
I believe they're launching their game. Was it today? Tomorrow, maybe?
Soon.
Yeah.
It'll be the next 24 hours or so if it's not already out.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting to see. And then of course on the DeFi front, we had a couple of interesting developments. So do you want to take us through Maple Direct?
Yeah, Maple Direct is actually a platform that's bridging institutional borrowers and lenders with accredited investors, and they're introducing a new direct lending arm, Maple Direct, and it's going to be going live in July. Now, the CEO, we talked to Sidney Powell. He told us that Maple Direct is basically there to provide a much-needed financial service for the Web3 industry that is not being serviced by banks. There is not an easy way for a lot of these companies to collateralize loans with digital assets. And that's basically what Maple Direct is built to facilitate. They're launching a lending pool with transparency to the lenders that allows them to access the ratio of over collateralization to loan values in a way that's very transparent, as opposed to some of the other opaque infrastructures for lending in the crypto sphere that we saw plaguing other institutions that got caught in contagions. They're also serving various capital allocators. They're working with crypto funds, DAOs, venture capitalists, high net worth individuals, yield aggregators, family offices, all of which need to pass these KYC checks before accessing the platform. And then they'll be able to participate in that lending in that pool. Now, until now, Maple has mainly been focused on unsecured lending to institutional borrowers, and they think that market conditions, however, are offering over collateralized loans. This is just the right time for it because that's what the demand is in the marketplace. An over collateralized loan is probably better than an under collateralized loan or one with no collateral. I think we can all agree on that. Now, partnering with the custodian is how they're going to be able to facilitate this. They're using the collateral on other chains like Bitcoin, custodial staked ETH, so they can broaden their risk management and cater to the market's preference for these over collateralized loans. And there's been an exit of major players like BlockFi and Gemini from these unsecured lending spaces, and there's been market difficulties. Maple and Direct is going to fill that space. Something like $55 billion was lent out by BlockFi and Gemini, and they've just disappeared from the market. So, DeFi markets like Compound and Aave have been stepping up to fill that gap, but there are certain limits for institutional players to be able to utilize those funds, especially if they're like non-KYC'd. And because Maple Direct has this kind of KYC'd regulatory approved sort of solution, it makes it easier for other institutions to utilize the loan. So I think that's actually a really great thing for the industry. And crypto lending is something that's been growing over the last 2 to 3 years to a large industry. So having these over collateralized players in the space with direct loans, I think speaks to the efficacy of it moving forward and being something that's a viable way for companies in Web3 that are major institutions to use their digital assets to get runway.
Oh, sorry. I think you froze for a second there.
Oh, okay. Where did I stop freezing?
Just until a new way for Web3 businesses.
A new way for Web3 businesses to use their digital collateral to gain runway through accessing funding. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting offering. With a lot of the crypto-friendly banks also kind of leaving the space, right? It opens a gap for players from within to kind of step up and try and fill that need, right? Because collateralized lending, I mean, people always want to monetize. If you're sitting on a huge stack of Bitcoin, ETH, or whatever, you don't want to just leave it idle, right? And you might not want to sell it to actually, if you need money to do something else. So, which is why lending markets were one of the first DeFi protocols or primitives that came up, right? Because that's the, I think, most important use case.
I concur. And I think a lot of these Web3 organizations now looking at the opportunity is like, hey, rather than trying to dilute our value by selling a portion of the company or dilute our value and our reputation by having another token offering or maybe another NFT mint, we can turn around and say, hey, look, we've got like this bank of Bitcoin or Ether or whatever the digital asset that we've used as our native asset. We want to use that as collateral. And Maple Direct will offer them a means to use that as collateral rather than, some of those other techniques and strategies that I mentioned that may not be best for the community or the company's long-term value.
Yep, makes sense. Moving on to some more crypto adoption news, right?
Yes,
it seems like every institution on the planet is trying to get into crypto after BlackRock threw its hat in the ring last week, right? So
right.
This is, of course, a project that's been going on for a while. Project Mariana is an initiative from the Bank of International Settlements, which is essentially the central bank of central banks, right? So it creates policy that's generally kind of adopted by global central banks. It helps them with settlements, clearing, stuff like that. So what they did was they deployed Curve's V2 AMM on Ethereum Sepolia testnet and basically played around with some Forex transactions using Singapore dollar, I think French franc, and which was the other one, Swiss franc as well. So, yep. So the report basically says that they're exploring how DeFi AMMs like Curve could potentially improve efficiency when it comes to interbank settlements for Forex, which is huge, right? Because Forex is the biggest market in terms of trade volume daily. It does trillions and trillions in trade volume on a daily basis, right? Because it's intuitively that makes sense because people are buying and selling things in various currencies all over the world. Obviously, they need to convert foreign sales back into their home currency and hedge and whatnot. There's a whole mountain of derivatives and swaps and a whole market that underpins this. So the fact that the big players are considering, or rather, they've been very clear to say that it's an experimental project and that we shouldn't expect anything to come of it. But the fact that they're exploring it during a bear market, I think, is promising, because
I think
usually
it's
we see
also,
these kind of announcements near the top, right? And these are
yeah.
always like kind of top signals when uh, when the big players jump in. But the fact that it's been a year and a half of pretty terrible price action, and these institutions are still interested in the technology underpinning everything that we're doing here is, I think that's a great sign.
I agree with you. And, I think it's also interesting they chose to go with Curve. Curve has definitely been in the headlines lately with some of the lawsuits going on against Egorov. So I think it's interesting. Just kind of an interesting wrinkle there.
Yeah, I mean, Curve's doing, I mean, their CRV USD stablecoin is doing really well. It's really expensive to use currently, like in terms of the interest rate, because I think I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I think the interest rate is dependent on the deviation of the pool price from the Oracle price or something like that.
Hmm.
So, given the volatility that we've had lately, I think that's one of the reasons that the interest rate is so high, right? Even though because it doesn't depend on utilization, right? And it's not like the model used by Aave, Compound, or any of the other kind of traditional DeFi money markets that we're used to. So, what's the interest rate right now? I think it's north of 7% to borrow stable coins against your like staked ETH or any of the accepted collaterals. So that's almost double of what you'd pay on, Aave, Compound. On the flip side, of course, you have the advantage of the Llama liquidations, right? So your position's a bit safer. You can potentially take on a bit more leverage without getting completely wrecked.
Yeah.
But again, it's a trade-off, right? How long do you plan to hold the position? I mean, if this is a long-term, you want like to set a position that's say 1.5x levered on ETH and just forget about it, I don't think you'd need to use Curve, right? You could do that easily on any of the other protocols. But if you think, all right, we're at 1900 and we could see like 2300 within a week, and you want to go balls to the wall, yeah, this makes more sense. I mean, on the way down, if your thesis doesn't work out, you won't lose as much. So,
And speaking of great albums by Accept, no, that's Balls to the Wall is a great album. The other interesting thing is in the Forex marketplace here, we're not talking about long-term positions. So, Curve might be perfect for this, given the fact that we're, moving quickly between one currency to another. So they're testing it for that purpose. It kind of makes sense.
yep. All right, let's move on to something that's been kind of, I think the whole crypto community has been pondering, like, what the heck is Prometheum ever since the CEO showed up on Capitol Hill.
So I can run us through this fairly quickly.
Yeah.
In 2020, Prometheum was just like any other industry participant in crypto, seeking guidance from the SEC in terms of how exactly we should be viewing digital assets. Is Ethereum a security or not? We don't know. And then we saw on, I think, the 13th of June, if I'm wrong about that, it might have been the 15th. I'm pretty sure it was the 13th of June. Aaron Kaplan, the CEO of Prometheum, testified before Congress, indicating that the actions of the SEC in the last 2 years plus have shown that there is actually a clear path to regulatory approval for industry participants to move forward and be compliant. And he said that that Prometheum is an example of one such institution. However, there's been a lot of scrutiny now over what exactly Prometheum has done to constitute its effective participancy in the ecosystem. For instance, Prometheum trades in no digital assets or any other assets. It hasn't gone live since inception, I think in 6 years or something like that of operating. Furthermore, there are some questions as to whether or not there was certain activities between the SEC and Prometheum prior to the Prometheum obtaining licensing from the SEC to operate. And then if I could actually, the license that Prometheum got wasn't one that allows it to trade in digital assets. It just allows them to potentially list them And Prometheum itself has been saying, well, we can list them and we'll determine what we can list and what isn't listed. And then in 20 days, if we don't get any type of like backlash from the SEC, then we'll know we're good. Well, this all kind of came to a head on Laura Shin's Unchained podcast when a counsel for a different company, Paradigm, came and challenged the position of Mr. Kaplan, stating more or less that Kaplan's understanding of securities laws and the laws that govern some of the types of securities that Kaplan said Prometheum would list, he basically challenged that understanding. In other words, Kaplan's wrong, says this individual, Sarah. Now, I personally don't have a horse in this race, but I will say that a lot of people on the sidelines have been looking at Prometheum and saying, we wonder what's going on, to the extent that the Blockchain Association sent out a Freedom of Information request to find out if there was anything going on between the SEC and Prometheum. Now, when Laura Shin mentioned that on her show, Kaplan dismissed it. So I think it just remains to be seen. Frankly, a lot of people in this space are looking at Prometheum as an institution that hasn't done any of the types of work in order to show substantial participancy, such as compared to like exchanges like Binance or Coinbase. But when you compare them, Prometheum will come and tell you that those are institutions that chose not to follow the letter of the law and that chose to expose US customers to risks, and that Prometheum is now operating in a way that will supposedly reduce the risks to US customers. Now, obviously, we need to protect US consumers. There's no question over that. But the line remains to be drawn in the sand where these types of securities or where these types of digital assets fall in terms of being securities or not. And because the SEC has yet to provide any type of clear indication on their policy towards this, it's very difficult for a company like Prometheum to stand up and say, oh, look, there is a clear guidance and policy. It's just very difficult to see any type of evidence of that because there has been none.
I mean, personally, I had no idea where these guys came from. I think that was the general reaction, when we all saw it, right? So,
yeah. Who are you?
Yeah. I mean, even like I wouldn't say I've been following every project in the space since 2016, but at least I'd be aware of something major, right? And so would you, I think, or so would most people who have been following the space for that long.
I mean, they didn't make any waves in terms of like getting in trouble or anything like that, which is a good thing. On the other hand, I haven't heard about Prometheum providing any type of developmental infrastructure for Web3, promoting any type of public goods, doing anything aside from supposedly following the letter of the law that has been laid out by the SEC, which, by the way, has taken the form of enforcement actions, which remain to be managed through the legal process. The SEC has not created any sort of pathway for regulatory guidance, and I think that is the big problem here. Like, people are saying, Prometheum, by standing up and saying this, you're damaging the industry and making it appear to lawmakers that we don't need intervention or guidance or clarity, when indeed we do. And so this is really the big issue, I think, with Prometheum. A relatively unknown entity now speaking for the greater industry in a way that it perhaps shouldn't.
Yeah. I mean, it just seemed like very kind of orchestrated and kind of rehearsed testimony and, kind of parroting the SEC's talking points, essentially, right? So that,
Yes.
I mean, that made it suspicious from the get-go. So I guess we'll just see how it shakes out.
And if anyone wants to see some fireworks, by the way, just at the end of that, you should tune into Laura Shin's Unchained podcast and check that one out.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I think we are reaching the end of the hour. So let's, I think we can wind up with the latest Polygon news.
And breeze through this year,
yeah.
Polygon's, by the way, a key Ethereum scaling team. They're intending to combine a proof-of-stake sidechain ZK EVM and the layer 2 of the Polygon 2.0 overhaul. And this unification would form, the third largest layer 2 network, holding nearly $1 billion in lock value. Now, the proof of stake chain on Polygon carries the most total locked value. I think zk-AVM has enhanced its security, and in the new 2.0, users on both chains are going to be able to transact securely and seamlessly without needing to bridge back to Ethereum. Now, despite this promising news, though, Polygon's Matic token fell probably 30% over the last month over allegations from the SEC that its digital asset is unregistered security. And this, again, remains to be seen. This is all allegations. It's not proven. Polygon, though, back to, it's committed to having, zero knowledge technologies. They've been implementing stuff like this, and they've allocated $1 billion towards this effort over the last 2 years. And this includes launching zk-AVM and developing Nightfall and Maiden projects. So, it's not a surprise to see them moving this direction towards privacy and scaling.
Yeah, I think it's. It was expected that they would transition the existing POS chain somehow, and now they've released. I believe earlier today they also released the architecture for the Polygon 2.0, like how the different layers will work.
Yeah.
So yeah, that'll be interesting to see. But of course, as always, there are critics as well. So Chris Bleck pointed out that all this is being done essentially by a multi-sig of a few trusted parties. That's been one of the key gripes about Polygon since the start, right? And a lot of these alternate layer one chains, right? Like the centralization risks, which comes with bridging or stuff like that. But I believe these are proposals that need to be voted on by Matic holders, right? So it'll be, of course, Polygon Labs, etc., would be holding a lot of it, but
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, we've seen a lot of the development that has led to the, layer 2 interconnectivity stemmed from a small core group of individuals that decided, hey, look, we're going to forge out here and build this. And the complexity that has grown and as a result of that now lies in the hands of those individuals that did the development. So for it to move forward in any sort of decentralized governance sort of manner, we have that sort of tackling with Moloch, right? The classic problem of coordination failures. And to avoid those coordination failures, centralization occurs. So I hope that they can just find a way forward with that. I'm not as skeptical about, I think, some of the centralization and development side, simply because of the fact that you have a very small group of developers in general in blockchain. So, I mean, these are the things that happen. But by the same token, that development power can be aimed with the group sort of mind. And so we will hope to see that.
So it looks like we have some breaking news. The SEC sent a letter, I guess, to the Nasdaq's CBOE and saying that, what did they say? That the applications for ETF applications were not sufficiently clear and comprehensive. That's probably why we tanked briefly and are now rallying again. So it was like the perfect stop run orchestrated by the SEC.
Really? Well, look at that.
Yeah, look at the chart. It's like literally a V-shaped recovery. So maybe someone came out and denied this later on. Who knows? So what did they say? Oh yeah, there we go. Which has jumped since BlackRock filed this application. Fell after the Wall Street Journal. Finally, it was down 1%, and yeah, it's picked up all those gains now. So,
well.
Yeah, interesting.
I wonder how predictable that was to certain individuals.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we see that if we dive into the fund flows, there will be some very fortunate options trades that might have been cleared and settled today.
My goodness.
Yeah.
And, blockchain networks will bring in a level of transparency that can eliminate those types of instances of alleged fraud or alleged insider trading.
Someone saying that's not breaking news. We knew about that yesterday. All right.
Okay.
In either way, I mean, I don't think the SEC is going to just roll over and say, all right, we've denied spot ETFs all this time, here you go. So it's going to be a long process, right? So
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen a lot of, with the exception of like BlackRock, that has such a stellar track record in terms of getting all of their filings passed, with the exception of one in 2014. I would be surprised to see a lot of forward motion on ETFs. I think if the SEC does decide to say BlackRock's going to be able to go forward, now people can look at that filing and say, hey, we'll file exactly the same type of parameters on ours from our market position, and how would you have a stance to deny us? And if that happens, then we're going to see a certain change in the ecosystem's climate. But until that happens, I think we need to have a healthy amount of skepticism on how much the SEC is going to make these markets accessible, given the current leadership.
Makes sense. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of back and forth. There'll be plenty of volatility going ahead. We are heading into the summer season, right? So it's ripe for the market makers to, pick our pockets both ways. So
Not so much a summer of love.
Mhm. Hey, it's better than last summer, right?
True.
Yeah. We had 3-digit ETH for a while there. So at least this time around, it looks a bit better.
Yes, it does. It's definitely in a better position relative to last summer. Well,
all right. So I think we can wrap this up. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you guys again next week, and hopefully we'll have the whole team in attendance with Cami and Owen back.
but in the meantime, it's always fun to see you guys, and I'm always happy to be here.
Yeah, and have a great weekend, everyone. It's in Canada. It's our Independence Day, Canada Day on the 1st. So long weekend here.
Excellent. Well, I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and that same goes to all of you.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thanks again. See you next week.